Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of Off the Cuff. It's a new series thing I've started just last week. It really is a series in which I want to talk about things that come to my mind. If you're new to the series, we're trying to find some way to talk about, like I say, things that come to mind, but really from an opinionated point of view, if I'm being honest. I've found in the past that I don't really get a chance to say my piece when I try and make the time to research it, which is good. It's good to research it, and I do the research, but usually by the time I get around to it, it's over. And for now, I feel like there's plenty I've got to say, and I do enjoy kind of speaking to people about it. So yeah, this is really just another way for me to do that. And I really, if you have any disagreements with some of the stuff I say, please comment, message me, anything, whatever works for you. And we can probably try and either work it out or not. I don't know, it doesn't really matter. The main point is I'm just trying to share my point of view, and anyone who disagrees with me is welcome to disagree as well, and perhaps teach me something I wasn't aware of before. Now, let's get started. The first little thing I want to talk about is regarding some video games things. It kind of came to my attention recently. I'm not so keen on it myself, but you've probably heard of Fallout 76. Now, Fallout 76 is a new game in the Fallout industry. Fallout series. And what Bethesda have done with that is they've gone the online route. Now, a lot of Fallout fans are happy with what they've done. They've essentially removed NPCs. They've basically shafted the Fallout players and a lot of the gamers who enjoy the game, even if they're not fans, And I've been watching this from a distance, not too interested in it really, because as soon as I heard it was going properly online, just like Elder Scrolls Online, I kind of lost interest. I'm not really interested in the massive multiplayer games. I'm personally just more into single player games and small co-op games. Now, the problem I've heard with Fallout was that they've tried to kind of push it in a direction, and they've not really fixed a lot of the problems they had previously. It's quite damaging. I'm kind of a fan of the Fallout series and the Elder Scrolls series, and I can't really play the game without mods. I mean, I can try, but there's always problems, and the game is made so much better through mods. And a lot of people have pointed out that perhaps Bethesda have started relying on that. Like mods are their quality control, or they're trying to basically just rely on the fans to actually make the game pretty decent. There was a lot of when they've released some new versions of Skyrim, they've released it with the original bugs that have actually been fixed by players in the community. And I think it's kind of it's really uncaring towards your customers, really. And I've noticed the same thing goes for EA as well. They've done a lot of games. I don't really play EA games often anymore because they've kind of destroyed all my favorite franchises, which really just goes to show. But I just kind of look at Bethesda and EA as an example of something that is going on in the industry that it frustrates me. That's the whole thing of pre-orders and early access games. Now, I personally I don't pre-order games, and I don't play them if they're early access, because to me, I'm going to play the game when it's done, when it's released. There's a few exceptions, typically with some really small indie games, where I've been following the game developers for a long time. I've played their previous games, and they consistently have good quality. But typically, I'll watch the development of the game. Example would be Prison Architect. I did play that before it was released, before it reached version 1.0, but leading up to that, they had been doing feature updates every single week for I think about a year, and by the time they released the game, I think after 3 years or so, they had actually been doing updates every month, and constantly showing their bug fixes. So I knew that this was a game that was going to get finished because they had so much support and they were so consistent. And the company that made it, Introversion Software, I've actually spoken to the marketing guy before. They are a really, I'd say authentic video game company. You know, they really have produced some amazing games. Uplink, a hacking game, amazing. Darwinia was another one that was really good. So they've got, they've got a lot of consistency for creating good games. And I just find it crazy that video game players will buy these games before they're out or pre-order them. It's like, you're going to get the game. You're going to play it. But if you pay for it before it's even out, and in the first day of release, you find out it's an awful game, you're already in trouble there. You've already put your money forward. And you might get a refund. Depends on the game's policy and all sorts. There's been a lot of examples. And another example is Bethesda had the $100 pre-order. I think it was called the Power Armor Pack for Fallout 76, and they were advertising this canvas bag, which looked really good quality and all the promo pictures. When people actually got the bag, it was nylon and it was kind of cheap. And Bethesda basically told players to go screw themselves in order to kind of get that resolved, and it's completely disrespectful, and I don't think it's going to work for video game companies in the long run. At least that's my hope, because I don't think you can treat your customers like that. Any video game company that treats their customers and their players well is, they thrive in the long run. And I feel like at a certain point they seem to get big enough where they just don't care anymore. Speaking of which, come on, Valve, release Half-Life 3. We've been waiting for years. Yeah, they don't really make video games anymore. All right, so going on to another thing. This is a very tense issue I've noticed, which is, that of human subjectivity. I've noticed that over the last decade, let's say, probably longer, there's been a real growth in the sort of, I'm trying to figure out the word to use here, but just the way people will put subjective opinion on a pedestal, like it means anything more than just opinion. Like it actually means something. There's a few examples I could look to, but again, I'm just this mostly opinions is just kind of off the cuff, which is that of British common law. British common law, they've got this whole law around hate speech, where if you say something that is perceived to be hate speech by the person you're saying it to or anyone who hears you say it, they'll be regarded as hate speech. If someone else thinks it's hate speech, doesn't matter what your intentions were, that's hate speech. Another example would be this whole thing around transgender and gender fluidity. The whole idea that you can think something about yourself which changes the facts of yourself. And a lot of people predicted early on in this that it would just spiral out of control. You get some really ridiculous situations, and it's happened already. There's an old chap in Europe who he was quite annoyed. I think he's 79, and he's quite annoyed because he's having trouble meeting ladies. And apparently he spoke to his doctor, and his doctor says he has like a really healthy body and he's like that of a younger man. So therefore he is requested, or basically demanded, to have his birth certificate changed so that he's 20 years younger, so that he will legally be seen as a 59-year-old rather than a 79-year-old. Now, if you don't see the problem in that and you think, oh, well, great, let him be seen as that, there's far too many things that can be seen as a problem there. And the same thing goes for some of the transgender people, removing their gender from their birth certificate or changing it. I cannot count the amount of problems that's going to cause with medical issues, because if a doctor actually genuinely thinks that this person has always been a male or a female, that is going to cause so many problems, because males and females are not the same. They're not, and there's so many physiological and hormonal and psychological differences that there are other factors. It's a very complex issue. There's many variables in decide who you become, but you can't deny that there are no differences. You can't say that there are no differences, because there are. It's proven over centuries, and if it's not proven over centuries, it's proven in society and culture for a reason. You can't just remove thousands of years of culture in a few years because you think that you are morally superior in your new opinion. If you have any facts or proof to prove me wrong, and I'm not talking about peer-reviewed scientific journals that have been peer-reviewed by no one and cited by no one. I'm talking about legitimate stuff that's actually been cited hundreds of times, at least a dozen times. Okay, and moving on to another little thing. This is it's not so much in the limelight now, but I've been looking into nuclear energy. I think it gets a lot of flack. A lot of people just think nuclear, bad. I think the Fallout series definitely hasn't helped there, and a lot of history hasn't helped. A lot of people think nuclear means nuclear weapons. But, nuclear energy is incredibly clean and efficient. If you compare it, if you're looking, okay, so with energy generation, you need to put in the least amount of effort and get the most amount of energy out of it. I believe fusion power is I don't know if it exists. I don't think it doesn't exist yet. But basically, when you reach the point at which you can put in no energy and get energy, or you can put in energy and get infinite energy, or more energy, you can get more energy out than you put in, then you've reached a point where you can have unlimited energy, really. And that's my understanding of it. Because if you create a feedback loop where more energy, there's surplus, and it comes back, can come back and feed the machine and create extra energy, so on, then that could create massive amounts of energy. And in the world we live in now, where we were burning coal and gas, and we're moving towards renewable energy sources, solar and wind power, but those are so small in their energy production. Now, I know that we're looking at improvements in solar and wind power, and I think we're looking at tidal power as well, which is a very untapped source of energy. But the amount of power they produce is very small, and we're trying to slowly, incrementally improve it. Whereas the problem with nuclear energy, obviously, is that it's very unsafe. But it already produces massive amounts of energy. So, and a lot of the nuclear reactors that are in use, are active, are actually old, decades and decades old. So they're actually really outdated. So when they fail, it's kind of not surprising, especially with the Chernobyl. I personally wouldn't trust the Russians to have extremely high quality industrial and reactor machinery parts. I wouldn't expect them to be the highest grade. There's a power plant I heard about just yesterday called CANDU, CANDU, in Canada, and that power plant, it apparently can use nuclear waste, which means that power plant can take in waste from other nuclear reactors potentially. This is all very, unthought of. So if you know anything more about that, let me know, because I'm very, very much interested in the prospect of nuclear energy. I think it's got a much better future ahead of it, unless we see a massive, massive change in wind power or wind, solar, or tidal energy. Now, another thing I was thinking about was I really don't know much about this, but I'm just kind of viewing it from afar, which is about the Yellow Jacket protests in France. I believe it was triggered by a rise in the fuel costs in France. Now a lot of people saying it's nothing more than that. But frankly, I think that there is more to be said there, because massive violent protests are rarely about something as small as a fuel price change. I believe the media have started expanding that description as now about high living costs. Personally, I think it's about more than that. I'm no fan of the EU. There is really there's a unrest that is very unsurprising, and the political class in most of the EU, definitely in the UK, and I know of in France and Germany, they have a disdain for the common people. It's despicable, really. But I think, frankly, no doubt, I have no doubt that the French people have probably been complaining for a while. They have probably been trying to have their voices heard for a while, and I have no doubt that if they have been ignored. So these protests are of no surprise to me. And frankly, I'm actually happy to hear that something's happening there, because I think people just haven't had enough. And it's funny because I hear that these protests actually followed Macron's approval rating dropping to 30%. That's a really low approval rating. It won't be surprised me if Theresa May here drops to something similar following her deal, which actually coincidentally brings me to my next point. There have been threats from the EU more recently. Basically, I believe they have threatened that with this deal, we have to accept this deal, or if we don't accept this deal, it's going to be no deal or no Brexit, according to a member of the EU Parliament. He said basically that we either go away from the EU with no deal at all, no agreement, or we're going to have to come back into the EU. Now, it's really not his decision, is it? If he wants to bring us back into the EU, they have to unilaterally decide that. The UK has to send a letter asking them to untrigger Article 50, I guess, and then they have to all member states will have to decide, and they all have to agree to let the UK back in. Really, they all have to agree on it. Really, so it's really not his decision, and furthermore, it's not his deal. It's not his decision on whether or not we go without a deal. We can kind of keep pushing it, maybe. But frankly, I would go no deal, because the EU is a horrible organization and they have absolutely no respect for the member states. They want nothing more, in my opinion. They want nothing more than to grow their power across Europe. They want to put together an EU army. Against who? We've got massive allies across the world, especially the UK. We got allies across the world. I believe one of the reasons they say is they want protection against the United States. Oh, you mean our closest ally? The US has supported Europe for a long time, and they've been there to help the EU countries a lot. I think it's really disrespectful to say, oh yeah, we need an army to protect ourselves from them. So yeah, I think the EU threatening the UK about this is really that's reason to leave. Why would you want to be a part of a political organization that threatens you? Why would you want to be a part of a political group that have basically said, yeah, if you leave us, we're going to make sure you get screwed over? France has already said that they're going to make sure we have no fishing rights. If we apply to this, if we stick to this deal, they're going to make sure we don't get any fishing rights. And then Spain is trying to reclaim a country which, well, not country, a place, I can never pronounce it, so I'm going to quickly Google this because I want to make sure I pronounce it right. Okay, that's not helpful. It doesn't give me a pronunciation at all. So British Overseas Territory of Gibraltar. Well, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Please let me know how to pronounce that. I'm horrible with pronouncing things. Spain is basically saying they want to reclaim it from Britain, and it's kind of like if we take this deal, a lot of EU member states are trying to get the best pickings they can because they know that the UK is capitulating to the EU, and it's disgusting. The UK is the 5th largest economy in the world. The UK is no small nation, and the UK is not alone. Numerous other countries have actually said that they will support the UK if they decide to leave. They're saying that they're actually willing to make an agreement with us. I think the examples, if I remember correctly, we've got, how many countries was it that actually said they'd deal with us? I believe it was Australia, Canada, China, obviously, Ghana. Uh, oh wait, got the list here now. Okay, there you go. Okay, Ghana, Iceland, India, Mexico, New Zealand, South Korea, and the United States. And more than that, it's funny with all these threats the EU are giving us. German industrialists have told their government that they're expecting their government to provide a free trade deal with the UK. So German companies they do not want to have any issues in trading with the UK. So yeah, let's leave. We'll be fine. This is the UK you're talking about, it's not actually I can't think of many weak countries or countries that struggle. Let's say we're not like South Korea. Because South Korea, if the UK and the US stop helping out South Korea, they're gonna get consumed by the North Korea, really, because they can't. North Korea is a lot more powerful than them, but we're kind of trying to keep them safe. They've adopted a lot of good policies, but North Korea has not, obviously. Right. So one last thing, a little thing I wanted to kind of have a think about, and it's a little more looking forward in the future, kind of reflection, which is, I'm thinking about how a lot of people have just started discussing ideology. It's become like a talking point quite often. People talk about whether they are socialist or communist or libertarian or liberal or whatnot, and I started thinking, it really seems to have become a big thing for people to talk about. And maybe it's just me. Maybe it's nothing new, really. But it really got me thinking about utopia. Because a lot of people have an idea of a utopia society, perfection. And it got me thinking, is it possible? Because I know like countries like the EU have started thinking that they've got this great idea for the future. Unfortunately, their great idea involves completely ignoring the individual sovereignty of every citizen and of the member states. They want to just consume them into their own massive block of federalist states. I believe they want to create the United States of Europe. Of course, undemocratically. So I think there's really a lot of thinking to be done there, because can we create a utopia? Is it actually possible? And under what circumstances? Would we have to sacrifice individual freedom? Would we have to sacrifice free speech? Would we have to sacrifice freedom of movement and association? Or is it possible to achieve a utopia? I mean, that's more like a dystopia, isn't it? So maybe it's not possible to reach a utopia. People will always disagree. No matter how perfect things get, there's always going to be people who actually have a problem with what you do. Probably worth thinking about. Now, I'm probably going to finish off there. If you have anything to say about what the points I've made, anything I've said that's wrong, let me know in the comments, get in touch, and hopefully you can actually teach me something new. You probably can. I'm not really researched these things, but I'm definitely going to. All right, that's all. Till next time.